All right, welcome everybody. We're continuing on with our material. This time we're going to be talking about the circulatory system, or as I have it referenced here, as cardiovascular system blood. So let's get started with our material. What are the goals for this unit? Understanding the functions of blood and the role it plays in the body. That's something I always like to talk about day one. Differentiate the components of blood. We're going to get started with that, but we'll take more time to get through that overall. And then finally, comprehend the numerous types of blood cells. So that's something that we're going to spend some more time with overall. So what is the cardiovascular system overall? Like, what's going on here, especially with regards to circulation, as we've been referencing. In regards to circulatory system, it is a system of rapid transport within the body. So what are we rapidly transporting? All of this. Nutrients, hormones, waste products. Don't forget about the waste. We got to get rid of waste product. Gases, which was literally everything associated to respiratory system, cells, and also heat. So we're transporting a ton of stuff simultaneously through the body. A very efficient transportation system, might I add. So a little bit more on that. Again, transportation of cells and compounds we talked about. Regulating pH, which remembers how acidic or basic something is a pretty big deal. Electrolytes involving interstitial fluids. That's a vocab term that we should be aware of. Interstitial means in between tissue. So this is the stuff that's found in the gaps of your tissue, if you want to call it that. So interstitial in this case is just referencing in between tissue. So your blood is going to help regulate that stuff. Limit blood loss. So when you have an injury and you're losing blood, it's going to make it so that you don't lose as much blood as you could. So that's pretty important. There are limitations to this, though, right? If you cut a finger while chopping up dinner or chopping veggies for dinner, you're going to bleed. You're probably going to bleed a lot, but it's not going to be a fatal wound. Whereas if you chop off a hand, that could very well be a fatal wound. So understanding the limitations. Defense against pathogens and toxins, that's all about your immune system. We're going to learn about those immune system cells in this particular unit. So they play a major role in protecting your body against all the bacteria, germs, viruses that we encounter daily. And then finally, absorbing and distributing heat as part of temperature regulation. That's what was just talked about in the last slide. But your vessels expand and contract according to how much heat there is. If it's too hot, they expand so you can release air or release heat out of your body. If it's too cold, they're going to contract to keep that heat internal. So this all makes sense. Not too bad. So what makes up our actual blood? Well, first of all, from now on, we're going to start using, when referencing the blood that actually circulates to our whole body, we're going to start calling that whole blood. We call it whole blood so we don't undermine the word blood over and over again. But whole blood can be broken down into two major components: plasma and the formed elements. Plasma is going to be the liquid component of blood. Obviously, blood is a liquid, right? We've all seen blood before. We've all likely touched blood before, hopefully just your blood. But it's going to be the liquid component, whereas the formed elements is going to be the things that we make. So what are the things that we make? Red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So these are things that we make in our red bone marrow. Remember the red bone marrow, that's stuff that we learned back in skeletal system. So the red bone marrow makes all these elements for us. Here we just see where we typically draw blood from. It's going to be in the inner arm. We're going to talk about this particular vessel found there that has a higher blood pressure, so it's easier for that. The blood sampling is something that doesn't take longer than 45 seconds. It depends on the experience of the phlebotomist. It also depends on how many vials you need. So how many tests are they going to run on your blood? So sometimes it's a little longer, but in an experienced scenario, it shouldn't take too long to get this done. Now, plasma. Let's focus on plasma today. Plasma is going to make up about 55% of your whole blood. So roughly 55% of your whole blood is going to be plasma, so a little more than half. Now, of that 55%, 92% of it is going to be water. That's pretty important. 92% of the plasma is water, and that makes sense. Remember how we mentioned plasma is the liquid component? For something to be liquid, it has to have water. So there's going to be quite a bit of water in your plasma. There's also going to be more proteins and oxygen than interstitial fluid. Don't worry too much about that. But finally, there are three special proteins found in the plasma that we do need to know: albumin, globulin, and fibrinogen. Now, for albumin, globulin, and fibrinogen, they can be summarized as far as their purpose in quick sentences or quick summaries. For albumin, all I want us to know is that it's involved with osmosis. So albumin is massive with osmosis to make sure that you regulate how much water moves in and out of the cell. Because osmosis is just the movement of water, right, from high to low concentration. Globulin is involved with a number of different things, but the thing that I want you to know with globulin is that it's involved with the immune system. That's it. Don't dive too much into this. You don't have to get too crazy. Finally, fibrinogen is one of the most important ones, and you have a very low concentration of it, as we're about to talk about. But the thing with fibrinogen that I want you to know is that it's essential for clotting. Fibrinogen is essential for clotting, so blood clots. When you have a cut, remember my example, you're chopping up veggies for dinner and you slice your finger. When you have a cut and now you have an open wound, fibrinogen is going to help clot that wound and plug up that wound so you don't bleed out any further. So pretty important. All right. Let's move on to our next slide. Okay, the keynotes. The keynotes can be helpful just because they review content that we already talked about. So for review purposes, not bad. Approximately half the volume of whole blood consists of cells and cell products. Plasma resembles interstitial fluid, but contains a unique mixture of proteins not found in other extracellular fluids. Here's our plasma. Now, obviously, we know what blood looks like, or whole blood, as we call it. Please remember that 55% of the whole blood is going to be plasma. Of that 55%, 92% of it is going to be water. Keep that in mind. The other 8% is going to be plasma proteins and solutes. Remember, we just talked about those other three. You don't need to know the percentages. So keep in mind albumin, globulin, fibrinogen. Albumin is involved with osmosis. Globulin is involved with the immune system. Fibrinogen is necessary for clotting. That extra regulatory protein is less than 1%, so it's not necessary to discuss. And then the other solutes, in this case, that's just other stuff found in plasma that's naturally found in your blood. So electrolytes, for instance, these are charged ions that play a vital role in cellular activities. That's pure chemistry. Stuff that we don't need to dive too deep into, more biochemistry, to be honest. Organic nutrients, useful for ATP production, growth, and maintenance of cells. That's all macromolecules, stuff that my previous units discussed. Fatty acids or lipids, glucose or sugars, amino acids or proteins. And then organic waste, that's going to be more associated with the stuff that you need to get rid of out of your body. That's going to be associated to breaking down and excretion. So that includes urea, which is a form of ammonia, which can be toxic. So you get rid of it as urine through the bladder and urinating it out. And then bilirubin is something your liver makes as a byproduct of cleaning your body out. And you typically remove it through your fecal matter. So it is excreted as well. All right. So I think that's a great place to stop for our first video. Like I said, just an easy getting introduced first video. It's a pretty short unit overall, just in general. So it shouldn't take us too many videos for us to go cover this content for circulatory system. But thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one.